civic engagement and voter drives in the schools.
So there is a bill, there is a bill actually sponsored, the prime sponsor is our colleague from Western Pennsylvania, Brandon Markosik, and I believe we're both co-sponsors on it. It would actually allow high school students to pre-register at 16. So they wouldn't get the franchise, obviously, until they turn 18 according to state law, but at least it would give them the opportunity to pre-register to vote with their county, so they basically can make their intentions clear that I do plan to be a registered voter, and you can do that. There have also been efforts, and Representative Kim may want to speak more to this, for mandatory civics education and things like that.
So I have a Generation Xer, 19 years old, and because of the chaos that ensued, because of our reproductive rights were taken away, that has been good for that generation. That has been very good. They've been very activated, and they were underestimated during the last election because they're like, Biden's, approval rating is low. They don't care. Gas prices are high. I pay for her gas. Like all of the, the regular, marks where they think that no one's going to show up. These guys, and mostly ladies, showed up and showed out because it was really important to them. And so I'm just really proud of that group, and I think they're a lot more aware, but we do have to make it easier for them to just, pre-register or just, vote in high school so that their voices are heard. And we heard their voices.
Let me ask a follow-up.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Let me ask a follow-up. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the other thing that I think is really important is for high school age students who turn 18 during the school year. There are several initiatives that I think, as a future, hopefully thinking thing, we have several organizations that are working on automatic voter registration when you turn 18. This is a very important thing that not only is the organizations that's a VP and a couple other ones. What's the other one that's sponsoring? Yes, conservation voters. There are others that are working on automatic voter registration in the state of Pennsylvania at the age 18, because a lot of the time it's not just automatic voter registration, but it's hopefully I see schools across the river who are holding elections in school, right, around the time of election day. They'll do it maybe the Monday before, the Monday after or something, but they will usually before, because they want the kids to vote before everybody else votes. And they are holding voter elections. What they're doing is very insidious, because they're not holding free and fair elections. What they're doing is they are putting a lot of propaganda into the vote, and then the kids vote. And that is a form of education, though, right? So they are training these kids from a very young age. They're voting at one of the complexes across the river, who shall not be named. Their entire school district is on one complex, and each one of them has an entire voting day. And they vote, and they tally the votes, and they publicize them, and they have parties, and they treat it like a real election. It's a whole thing. And that's in addition to teaching them democratic practices through electing presidents for every grade and for schools and for all these different things. So part of it is, doing some of these other measures, but the other part is we have to realize, especially in, as the Republicans like to say, democratically run cities, that we are missing out on very important opportunities to teach kids about what voting even is when they're younger. In the city of Harrisburg, and I'll keep saying that because this is where I do the work. You will talk to folks in high school who are like, "Oh, I can register to vote right now." Yes, you can register to vote right now if you're going to be 18 by a certain point. Oh, so you mean I could do this? You mean I could do that? They have no clue. But if you talk to kids across the river, they absolutely know exactly all of the deadlines, and are very invested and very excited to vote once they turn of age. So we also have to cultivate a very strong culture of, again, voter education, voter activation, as well as registration. And that activation and education if you register them and they don't ever go vote, as we see on average in this city, 50% of 33,000 is still not 33,000 voters that are registered in the city of Harrisburg. So I just want to say that. And who's running for office now that we are getting past, YPOC, who's running for office now that we're getting past some of the issues with receivership in our own school district, we are going to be partnering with our school district to make sure that we start having these conversations with our seniors in particular, who we know we have a very captive audience at that time, to make sure that they get registered.
And I really quickly, just to add to that point as well, I do want to say, and I know this is nonpartisan, but the Dauphin County Democratic Committee, there's a dedicated volunteer, Carl Fisserow, who recruits others to actually register students in schools and high schools. And so that's been very receptive as well, with the high schools allowing him to do that. And you did have a follow-up question, yes? Okay. So, okay.
I knew what you were gonna ask, Otto.
What was the follow-up question?
But she answered.
I was gonna ask what's being done now.
Yeah.
You know, we have other states that are taking
Right.
away what can be taught in schools. What are we trying to actively do now?
We have a
But to
very
your
captive
point-
audience right now, yep. they do.
To your point, my son's gonna be, sorry, my son's gonna be 17 in a few weeks, in about a month, and he was born in 2006, which was a midterm election. We went to the polling place with him, right on, we used to get, when we had the old machines with the curtain, we used to bring him in, let him check everything out, maybe he pushed the green vote button once or twice, but we did that with our kids. It was really important to us. I remember having a third grade election. Michael Dukakis won our third grade election. And I was so convinced he was gonna beat George Bush, and then it didn't happen. They let the adults vote instead.
I mean, that is part of the issue when we talk about these things, where our young people have very valid concerns, because they recognize that we are leaving them a particular world to deal with. I think you have to be very cognizant of that, right? When you look at the voting populace, when you look at the populace that is in charge of decision making, right? A lot of them are very out of touch with the needs of the current demographic. And so when we talk about the people who are most adversely impacted, we also have to have that being reflected in those who are at the power seat of that final decision making. And I'm glad that you brought that up in terms of, hey, if they're not coming to you, I would say, if they're not coming to you, go to them, right? Bring those voting opportunities to the students, to the schools. Because I know for case in point, in undergrad engineering, it's like you have to take your FE exam. And the numbers showed that, like, when we required the students to go to a different place to take the exam, it dropped, the numbers dropped. Whereas when they brought the exams to the school, you'd have almost like over 90% participation. And this is just for, let me not say just, this is for a license that is pretty much required for that profession. So think about it when it comes to civic engagement or voting, where we're not making it accessible. I think that's the other big issue. It's not just, hey, come out and vote. It's how are we ensuring that you are able to actually participate, whether you are differently abled, you have visual impairment, you have, maybe English may not be your strongest language. I'm like, these are things that we don't often think about when we're talking about accessibility to voting. But if I have to take a day off, find a babysitter, to go be able to have a vehicle, or make sure I know the bus route to get there, make sure that the bus will get there on time, and then I have to come back and cook and clean and do all these things. I'm like, you think twice about showing up. Like, and then, oh, I forgot, or my registration was recanted. Like, we don't think about all these other steps that make the person like not feel like showing up. Whereas let's make it as easy as possible for folks to actually participate.
Making things easy is cheating.
That's
right.
I follow up on Winnie's. Again, accessibility, we do things that we don't inadvertently put up barriers. My voting poll has changed in the last 5 years, 3 different places. And so what if someone shows up, coming out of work, losing an hour's pay, and showing up the wrong place? I'm not gonna go find the right voting place and turn around.
Absolutely.
I cannot emphasize how no excuse write-in ballots are the key to democracy. Because it's easy to write in autumn fair and DJ. You can sit there, I can Google her and be like, what is she about? And make a good decision. And I can hold on to my ballot for a week.
Yes.
And be an informed voter, guys. And it's easy to do that instead of showing up, oh crap, who do I vote for? Like, how many times have you been texted the day out, like, who should I vote for? Which is fine, they're there to vote, but we have to push the write-in, mail-in ballots, because that is the way to go, and it's safe, and it's
And
free.
it is increased participation. The numbers do not lie. More people have, since Act 77 was passed, rightly so, on a bipartisan basis, people want us to forget that. It was a broad bipartisan bill that was supported. You know, voter participation has increased, and that's a really good thing. My father, for example, has health issues. He can't stand in a line for 2 or 3 hours, and there are many like him. It's not fair to make them do that. He gets his mail-in ballot, to Representative Kim's point, he can look at the candidates, you know, maybe ask my advice occasionally. But it's so simple.
But I would say even for me as a generally able-bodied person, during COVID when I pretty much had to do the mail-in ballot, it was very helpful to know that I could actually have time to review all the names that were listed. And even for me, one of the more irritating things was, oh my word, look at how many of these vacancies literally either there's nobody running for that position or it's running uncontested. To me, that's the other element of voter participation that we don't talk enough of, is how many opportunities for public service run uncontested, or there's literally nobody like running for that particular office in your region. And also people don't realize that there's like, you're supposed to vote more than just once every 4 years. I think that's the other
Every
thing
6
we-
months, there's
It's
an
pretty
election
much like
every 6 months,
I know
not
people,
including special.
yeah, I know people, I'm like, if I'm like, Winnie, you're voting like every year, I'm like, I know.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, I'm voting twice a year,
yeah.
every
You
year.
know, they're like,
Multiple times.
they're like, Winnie, like, what are these things you're always voting for? I was like, do you not know what
Right.
municipal elections occur too?
All of it.
Like,
I'm
there's
voting for all of
something.
it.
So I think there's an opportunity to really educate people on that.
Yes.
So I just want to give a number. We had 3,200 people vote in the election that just passed that included our city council members and our treasurer. Overall, it was 3,200 people. So I want to be clear
That's
that that's
10%.
not a lot of people.
Yeah.
So when we say voter turnout goes up, it does during certain years. We all know when,
Yes.
Yeah.
right?
It's amazing.
Right? During our presidential election years.
Yeah.
And in those off years, it goes way down. In the city of Harrisburg, the most people who ever voted ever was during Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Period.
Yes.
That's it, and that's all. There's no other comparison, there's no number that comes even as close. Even when they were voting against certain candidates in future elections, right? When they were coming out to vote against a candidate, it still didn't drive out as higher as voter turnout. So, all that to say, if we are having those problems, because I think Autumn left, but if we're having those problems, imagine the issues a new voter, an 18-year-old would have, if we don't get them ready for that, starting as early as possible. Listen, I think we should be teaching about voting in preschool.
That part.
Like literally,
Yes.
if that is a mechanism by which we get pretty much all the funding to our municipalities,
Yeah.
for our schools, for all those things, I need a kindergartner. I need you to
Yes.
teach it to me like I'm 5. Because that is how local, and the other piece of that too is local elections, in my mind, matter most. Because all of this funding, all this ARPA monies and all these other federal dollars that flow down to the local level is voted on, is presented by your city administration and voted on by your city council or your municipal council or your borough councils. So how those dollars get spent is by a person who looks a lot like me, looks a lot like you, is looked by people in this room. That's how that money gets allocated, and you don't want it to going to nefarious purposes, that's all I'm saying.
And remember, in your local governing bodies, that is the group that you actually have the most direct access to. They are within your community. They're the ones who ideally should have a very clear understanding of where your respective pain points are. It's very difficult to, respectfully, to go to a, state, like state representatives or whatever. No, your municipal representatives, they are the direct heartbeat to your region. When you're saying, oh, there's potholes on my street, this road hasn't been maintained in XYZ years, there's parking issues, they're throwing paint and paint thinners down the, rain spout, there's littering, there's illegal dumping, there's some noxious gases, right? These are things that they're directly tied to regulatory requirements. And so if you need somebody to advocate, and sometimes it is on your municipal level that change can actually be done, because even your regulatory agencies, they're beholden to however their regulations are written. And so that could come down to your state, but also oftentimes it comes down to your municipal ordinances. And that's why it's so important to vote wisely.
We have 2 more questions. Three. So go ahead.
I think part of the frustration is that we do know that there is higher voter turnout when there's like a salacious or crazy event happening. So I think people are actually voting against the tumor that we have, which is kingmaking, which is that dark money. So people will actually come out because it's like a reality TV show that season, right? So we have to go out and make a point because we created some type of drama around the vote, right? So I think what's frustrating to me, if I'm honest, is that 2 Tuesdays ago, we couldn't get a state rep to say anything about voter disenfranchisement, about anything. And we're talking about 2 people who have notable history of saying things about re-entrance, right? So if what we're saying is that we want to ban boxes for employment and we want to guarantee that re-entrants have opportunity, it's not just about workforce development. If you want full rights restored, it's all the way to the government level. So I have to say off the bat, I'm very disappointed that all of a sudden, there's such a need and such a passion to talk about voter disenfranchisement when literally 2 weeks ago, we couldn't drag any type of advocacy for a disenfranchised community who didn't even understand. So
Did you contact us?
whether or not people wanted to take a position on what was happening, I think there was a miseducation that was happening, that when any level of miseducation happens with the people that you serve, whether you're in that space or not, it behooves you to educate what could be coming to you all's doorstep, right? So it's not about did I reach out to someone personally, because it was happening, right? So be that as it may, because that's really not my space of contention. I think it's really easy for us to point out monsters that are on the hill. It's very quiet to point out monsters that are on the hillside, right? So we're talking about Allison Hill and all these other locations. When we talk about civic education, politicians are behind the curtain. You're able to speak on things that we may not have the ability to speak on. You're able to say it with a level of conviction. So just as clear as you all can talk about Scott Perry, just as clear as we can talk about Mastriano, and all of those levels of exposure happen. But we know that there's clear king-making that's happening amongst your peers. That if that education or if that level of advocacy existed, people would want to come to the poll. So there's a difficulty in arriving at the poll, because if my peers are engaging in this, right? If my peers are doing a thing, and I'm not doing it, right? I'm not getting dark money, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. But the people who are representing, the people who I'm chummy with, I'm having dinner with, I'm standing and co-collaborating on bills and legislature with, if those people are in the process of king-making and corruption, and there's no one speaking to the tumor, I'm not gonna go vote for anyone, right? Because everyone looks the same if I cannot pinpoint a clear enemy. So I guess my question is, from a state rep level and even from grassroots, one of the things that we have to look at is, what is the willingness, what is the level of advocacy, what is the level of bringing truth to power and making darkness to light efforts? Because what I found is that it's very easy to be quiet until it's your turn, right? So yes, something is happening in the city of Harrisburg that could very well happen in Susquehanna Township tomorrow. And we can't wait until it hits our doorstep to find the words around legislation and advocacy. So what is the level, because here's my concern. State reps and nonprofits have this red tape that they can't speak on things certain ways and blah, 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 blah. But it's very easy to speak on things outside of the city. Very easy to say, oh, I can get involved if I have a thought about Scott Perry or Mastriano or someone else, but I can't have an opinion about the mayor. I can't have an opinion about this city council person because of my red tape, right? So as voters, and you're thinking about rights, but one of the things about rights is advocacy. You're a state representative for the people largely affected by what's happening. What level of advocacy do you have to address the very clear and obvious ways in which voter disenfranchisement is happening in your own backyard or literally in your own house?
So with the story I articulated with my school board in Susquehanna Township, I went to my school board in Susquehanna Township and addressed my concerns. I don't know that, I mean, I'm not the kind of person that is going to, I don't legislate via Twitter. I don't legislate via Facebook. Those things are informational tools that I can keep people informed about what's happening, what services we can provide. So that's just not my personality. So I am not going to speak on each and every issue that is happening in this world. And if you know, the things that I feel compelled to speak out about, I will. When we're doing events and things like that, I do not know the ins and outs and the details of Mr. Jones's case. I was obviously reading Penn Live and interested, but I mean, so I'm gonna have to plead ignorance. What I will say is I spent 12 years as a mental health and child advocate. So I do not agree that we, and I've never agreed that we as legislators have an elevated voice. I think everybody has a voice. And clearly, people today in this gathering, sitting here today, are using their voice to do something good and promote democracy, right? And call things out when you see them. So I've never been one to subscribe to the fact that just because I'm in an elected position, I do not have a voice or my voice is minimized, and others don't have a voice. So I guess that's how I respond.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I have a response to that response. So here, two things. One, the question, right, I keep forgetting about this thing. So I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be elected, an elected official, if that is your response. And I'll say why. Because when you are elected to represent people, you do have an elevated voice.
Yes.
And that is an important concept because you are an elected official. That's number one. Number two, I think that not only did Mr. I forget the writer's name now, not only did he lay the case out so clearly over 2 or 3 articles just in Penn Live that we all who are involved in this space have a very good understanding by the time we're done reading that. To then say you plead ignorance, I don't buy that. And I love you, Justin, you know that.
Yeah.
But I don't buy that.
Elected ignorance.
And then third, the question that Anna said was, I can't remember how she phrased it just now, but she said something, whatever it didn't matter what she said, but she said, did you call us, did you contact us? So here's the other issue with that. I know that elected officials are busy. I as a person am busy. We all are busy. I am as a community leader am busy. We are doing all kinds of things. But what I think is important to note here is that when people like specifically Anna and I sound the alarm, which we had been doing for weeks about an issue like this, it is difficult to have our elected officials say nothing. And it's not, you're not my direct elected official, Patty is, but it's difficult. We have 3 people three persons of color who represent our district now, and this part of our little world. And it is difficult for us to sit back as Black and brown people who are in this fight. We're up to our necks in it. People are coming for us. They are threatening our families. They are threatening our friends. They are threatening our positions. If I had a job to call, they would have called it. Because they did that when I was at Hamilton and when I was at UPMC. Right? They're calling for this to be suspended and that. And give your degree back. All that stuff. And people around us who I know everyone was whispering about Lamont. I know it for a fact. I know it.
And
When
had
I talk-
opinions. Just
When I
didn't
talk to
know.
I heard I know it
Well,
because, right?
I spoke to
So-
Lamont about it.
Absolutely.
So
So
you
it's-
shouldn't be ignorant about it.
Well, no, but
So it's not a defense time. What
no,
I'm
no,
saying
no,
is,
what I'm saying is, as far as a public
it's
comment.
not a defense time.
It's a different.
It's already passed. It's not a defense time. But what I'm saying to you, as a response to you, is what I'm saying is, it is difficult when you have these folks. So something Senator Arbor said to me maybe last year. He said, I know exactly what you are calling for when you say elected officials should be doing this, this, and this. We should be doing certain kinds of constituent services, and we should be doing this, this, and this. And he said to me, tell me how I can support you in doing this work on the outside, because I understand that it's difficult. So if that is something that both of you would agree with, that this is very difficult work, all I'm asking for is maybe we can find a way that our elected officials can support the people who are doing this collective constituent work. This is nonpartisan work.
Right.
If a Republican ex-offender was
Yes.
put up against the same challenge,
Yeah.
I would not be like, oh, well, he's a Republican, I don't
Yeah.
give a shit. That's not what I would do. Because that person, first and foremost, if I'm in this district, is a resident of Harrisburg, a resident of Dauphin County, and they would be a peer in the community, and someone who's aspiring to lead, and even a person who I disagree with ideologically should not be held out because of that reason. So that's what I'm saying. It's not about Lamont. That's what even Lamont said. That's not about Lamont.
Right.
This issue was much bigger than Lamont.
Yes.
It threatens the way that we do democracy here,
Yes.
in the city, in the county, in the state, and in the country. And this is something that I implore, if there's a public statement that can or cannot be made, we talk to Lamont and decide, whatever the case is, I'm hoping our elected officials can find a way to support people like us
Yes.
who are doing this work day in and day out. There's stuff that we do that y'all don't even see, just like there's stuff that y'all do that we don't see.
Exactly.
But what about the seeing part? Because that's the part that mobilizes people to get out of their houses and to go to the polls and to actually be activated. That's why I keep talking about voter education and activation, because it activates them to keep participating. When they feel like their elected officials can be elected and then sit back when big moments like this happen, then they're gonna sit back when it's time to vote. And that is a very important thing.
That's a fair point.
Next question.
I'm sorry, hold on, but may I?
Sorry.
Because you said something that really struck me, and respectfully, I must elevate this, right? When you said, I do not legislate via Twitter, X now. And so,
heartbreaking.
right?
But I guess not legislate, that was the wrong term, but I'm not one of those people who believes everyone needs to know my thought about each and everything. And I know, you have clearly
Well, don't
made
come
the
at me.
distinction, no, I'm saying, you have clearly made the distinction. So,
Exactly.
and so I absolutely.
And this
recognize
is not necessarily about you personally or per se, but like, I believe you're elevating a sentiment that runs pervasive in those who we have entrusted to be our representation in key decision-making spaces. And so when you say that, pretty much how I'm interpreting what you had said, correct me if I'm incorrect, in that is that you are not one to more intentionally engage in such spaces of the Twitters and the Facebooks or whatever for the purpose of educating those demographics that you are supposed to be representing. At least that's how I'm hearing it. Because for those, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that social media is by far one of the fastest growing engagement spaces. So if you're saying you're looking for votes, you're looking for participation, especially when we're saying about civics engagement for K through 12, they're all over Facebook. They're not correction, depending on the demographic.
TikTok.
They're on TikTok. They're on Snapchat. I know my African aunties are on the WhatsApp. Right? There are people on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has changed just over the last 2 years. And so depending whatever social media platform you're looking for, it's a particular demographic that you're reaching. That if you refuse to engage them, right? As I said, if they're not coming to you, you gotta go to them, right? I have to be able to speak your language. I know I've learned a lot just from YouTube University and TikTok, college. I kid you not. Because the way folks are able to break down very technical information to make it very practical for people. I know, I actually enjoy doing that for environmental, stories or harassment and assault related topics. Why? Because I understand people are not gonna understand legal jargon. They're not gonna understand technical jargon or legalese like that I'm supposed to talk as a professional. But when I tell them how, hey, this thing actually relates like this for you, and then people actually respond back and reach out to me, and they find me in other platforms. Because they recognize not only my position, but the proximity to power and decision making that I may or may not have. Or they know, okay, if I tell you and I share with you my story, maybe you can connect me to the person who knows it. I don't have to be the person, the end goal. I don't always have the power to do the thing, but I know somebody, I can connect them to somebody, and for me to sit there and say, I'm not gonna engage on Instagram and TikTok or whatever, simply because, my opinion. I'm like, I am all up on these internets, and I don't really have to share my personal opinion. What I need to do, at least to my understanding, is ensure that education and awareness is a key priority. You lose a lot of people when you choose not to engage with them in platforms that literally is their desired language. Because you're not, otherwise you're not talking to them in the language that is